Infinite Kraken presents A Monk and His Spy, written by Anna Kalloch. Transparency Notice. In an era where the use of AI often goes unmentioned, the author values creative integrity. While the core narrative and characters are original, this work was shaped with the assistance of artificial intelligence. Audio production powered by 11 Labs.
Chapter 3. First Light. Thin Ice. Neve woke to the sound of bells, not the kind you hear in a city, buzzing, digital, insistent, but deep, deliberate tolls that seemed carved out of stone and mist. For a few seconds she lay still, disoriented, wondering which cover story she was supposed to be living. Then the wool blanket scratched at her neck, and the mountain air reminded her that, for now, she was hiding in a monastery. She sat up slowly, muscles stiff from the climb and the slab of wood that passed for a bed. Her head ached faintly, not enough to regret the ail, but just enough to remember it. The cell was dim, lit by pale beams slipping through the narrow window. Outside she could hear faint movement, footsteps on gravel, the murmur of robes brushing stone. The monastery was waking up. She dressed quickly, laced up her boots, and tucked her shirt tight against the chill that clung to the walls like a second layer of stone. The hallway outside was just as quiet, but not dead. Somehow it managed to hum with activity without a single raised voice. The dining hall was already occupied, dimly lit and hushed. She slipped in and sat at the same place as the night before, across from Brother Caden, who looked just as thrilled to see her as he had last night. "Morning," she offered, voice low but not exactly warm. He didn't answer. Shocking. She picked at the bread and porridge provided, then looked across the table. "Is there somewhere I can wash my clothes?" she asked, keeping it practical. "And maybe something I can help with? I'm not great at sitting still. It's not my spiritual gift." Before Otto could answer, Caden cut in sharply, without even looking up. "This isn't a premium retreat for rich people, and I'm not your personal tour guide." Neve blinked, then leaned back just slightly with a smirk. "Wow, that's probably the most words you've ever spoken to me." She took a bite of bread. "Anywho, shame. I was really hoping you'd wash my underwear and all." Otto cleared his throat, cutting the tension like a blade through bread. "All right, that's enough jousting for one morning, you two." He hailed a younger monk passing behind them. Barely more than a boy, no more than 18, with curly brown hair and soft brown eyes. He was so skinny he looked like he might take off on a windy day, moving lightly on his feet and not saying a word. "Brother Silas, would you show our guest the washing basin?" Otto added, turning back to Neve. "And if you're serious about helping, the library could use a good dusting." Brother Silas gave a small nod and gestured for her to follow. They walked in silence down a long, cool hallway, lined with narrow arched windows and aging stone. After showing her the washing basin tucked in a side alcove, where she could return later to scrub her clothes, he continued toward a heavy wooden door at the far end of another corridor. Neve followed and muttered under her breath, "If nobody starts talking to me soon, I might end up chatting with myself. Split personalities can be very productive, or so I've heard." Brother Silas opened the door to the library and stepped inside with practiced ease. The room smelled of dust and old paper, of ink and quiet hours. The architecture was a quiet masterpiece. Vaulted ceilings that arched like clasped hands overhead, ancient timber beams darkened with time, and tall, narrow windows that filtered in light like it was sacred. The stone floor bore the smooth, uneven wear of centuries, and alcoves lined with wooden shelves reached high up the walls, filled with cracked spines and leather bindings that whispered of forgotten prayers and forbidden knowledge. Without a word, he began gathering supplies, an old rag, a feather duster, a small pail. He handed them to her. "Thank you," she said automatically. When he didn't respond, she raised an eyebrow. "Well, you're welcome, Miss Neve. Thank you for wanting to help. What a generous and useful young woman you are." Still nothing. She tilted her head, narrowing her eyes. "Nothing? Really?" The words came sharper than intended, edged with the kind of frustration that slipped in when sarcasm stopped working. Brother Silas blinked at her, then widened his eyes as if remembering something urgent. He held up one finger and darted off. When he returned, he had a scrap of paper and a pencil. He quickly scribbled a sentence and handed it to her. "I can't speak." Neve smacked her forehead. "Idiot," she muttered to herself. Then aloud and in hesitant sign language, she asked, "Do you sign?" His face lit up, and he nodded enthusiastically before signing back. She laughed. "I'm a little rusty, but hey, great chance to get back into it." They worked together in companionable silence, signing here and there as Brother Silas showed her the sections of the library, pointing out books he clearly liked, his gestures animated, almost reverent. At one point, Caden passed by the library door. Neve caught sight of him through the crack and gave him a cheerful little wave. He rolled his eyes and kept walking. Neve shook her head with a sigh. "Why do I bother you so much, Brother Caden?" she muttered to herself. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something fascinating about him, something sharp beneath the surface calm. She felt drawn to his coldness in a way that made no sense and yet felt inevitable. She frowned and mumbled under her breath, "Get a grip, woman. You've already got enough stamps on your SIN card to qualify for a group rate to hell." Once the library was clean, Neve returned to the basin to wash her clothes, sleeves rolled up and determination setting her jaw. By the time she was done, the sun had begun to dip behind the peaks again, and the bell rang for evening meal. She made her way to the refectory and slipped into her usual seat. This time, to her surprise, Brother Silas sat beside her, offering a shy smile as he greeted her in sign. They continued their conversation from the library, hands moving quietly between bites. Otto, watching from across the table, raised his brows. "You can sign?" Neve nodded, fingers already in motion. "A little rusty," she signed and said aloud, "but it's coming back." Otto beamed. "It's good to have someone who can actually understand him. That boy's had a lot of patience." Across from her, Caden looked up briefly, just long enough to glance between her and the younger monk, and then gave her a look so withering it should have been grounds for a monastic inquisition. Neve caught it and grinned. "Careful, Brother Caden. You might block a nerve with all that eye-rolling." She leaned back with her cup of ale and added bluntly, "I've been openly hated before, don't get me wrong, but I usually earned it. This might be a new record. I've barely even done anything yet." After that, the rest of the dinner passed quickly, the warmth of the ale dulling the sharp edges of the day. That night the monastery was still, but her sleep wasn't. The quiet pressed in too close, and when it finally cracked, it did so with sharp edges. She dreamt of him, Fergus, the right hand of the organization. To get the secrets, she had to get to him, and so she did. It took 3 agonizing years of sharing his bed, becoming the woman he desired, and bearing her true self deep enough that even she began to forget where the mask ended. She could still feel him on her skin, like an oil that wouldn't wash off. That feeling always lingered after a mission, but Fergus was the worst of them all. He liked to call himself charming while carving cruelty behind closed doors. She'd played the role of sweet, obedient, adoring. It made her stomach turn just remembering the way he'd touched her, the things he'd said, like she was an object he'd bought, not a person who might kill him in his sleep. In the dream, she smiled like she had in real life, polite, docile, fake, while screaming behind her teeth. Every second she'd spent with him was a second she'd wanted to end him, but that was part of the job, and a job she'd already been doing far too long, all things considered, especially for someone still in her early 30s. During those 3 years, she hadn't slept soundly once, always half alert, even in her dreams, always waiting for the next mask to wear or the next lie to remember. She woke up sweating, fists clenched in the wool blanket, heart racing like she'd just run up the mountain again. She wiped a hand across her face, whispered into the darkness, "Still not free, huh? And here I thought it didn't bother me anymore. Seems like this place is making me reconsider my wreck of a life." She rolled onto her back, staring up into the dark. Going undercover wasn't just pretending to be someone else. After a while, you became them, piece by piece, lie by lie. You didn't just lose your name. You lost your edges, your roots, the things that made you you. That was the job, and she'd done it too well. Sleep didn't return. Eventually, she gave up on it entirely. She got dressed, pulling her boots on quietly, and slipped outside into the night air. She already had the layout of the building committed to memory. Exits, choke points, blind corners. Old habits died hard. Even surrounded by stone and silence, she needed to know how to vanish if the world came crashing in again. The courtyard was bathed in moonlight, shadows long and silver. The monastery's silence wasn't oppressive now. It was meditative, layered in stone and solitude. Neve moved through it like a ghost, her breath misting faintly. She passed through the archway and followed the path beyond the buildings, descending a narrow trail until she found a weathered bench nestled against the ridge. It overlooked the lake below, still and dark, cradled by the mountains. A light breeze stirred the air, brushing strands of hair across her face and rippling the surface of the water. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting its pale reflection across the lake like a silver path stretching into nowhere. She sat, elbows on her knees, eyes on the shimmering water. The cool breeze brushed against her face, and for the first time all day, her shoulders loosened. A walk to the lake might do her good, maybe even a swim, though that would be a thought for another day before winter truly set in. The idea hovered not for tonight, but as something to look forward to. Just having the option felt like luxury after years of constant vigilance. She heard a shift behind her, a breath, the sound of fabric brushing stone. "Don't be shy, Brother Caden," she said without turning. "It's not proper to stay hidden in the darkness, even more for a monk." The man huffed, clearly caught, and stepped into the moonlight with all the enthusiasm of someone attending their own dental surgery. A guest should not be out roaming the monastery at night. "How did you even manage to get out?" She smirked. "I have my ways. Finding an open door, or making one open, as a matter of fact." After a pause, she tilted her head slightly and looked him straight in the eyes. "You are fascinating, Brother Caden. For someone who seems to despise me deeply, you do gravitate awfully close." She scanned his face, watching for any flicker of a reaction. Caden met her gaze evenly. "Because you give off a shady vibe," he said, flat as stone. She laughed loud and unapologetic. "You're right. You can call me shady. Others call me Neve, though. But hey, mystery's part of the charm, isn't it?" They kept staring at each other for a moment longer, neither one blinking, as if both were silently daring the other to flinch first. "Are you always this friendly with strangers?" she asked, tone light but with an edge. "Only the ones who sneak around at night," he replied. She smirked. "So I'm special." "More like inconvenient." "Delightful," she muttered. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, What keeps you awake at night?" She tilted her head, lips curving with amusement, but her eyes stayed sharp, watchful. "Well, definitely. Not you." It was teasing, sure, but there was an edge beneath the smile, a quiet test. She wanted to see what he did with that, if he flinched, if he leaned in. She wasn't just provoking him. She was reading him. Old habits died hard. He gave her his signature look. "Do your ghosts weigh on your soul that heavily?" She shrugged, glancing out toward the lake. "Depends on the night," she said with a faint smile, cool as ice and twice as rehearsed. Regret wasn't her style. It had no tactical value. But if anything lingered, it was Fergus. That last night with him had burrowed deep, like shrapnel left in flesh. She'd moved on, filed it away, but some files never close clean. Something in the air shifted. A strange awkwardness settled between them, heavy and unexpected. Neve stood and brushed the invisible dust from her pants, then walked past him. As she did, she touched his shoulder, lightly, almost an afterthought. "It would be a shame for you to get a cold because of me wandering the grounds at night," she said, voice soft but unmistakably teasing. "Good night, Brother Caden. Let's hope I won't be haunting your dreams tonight." She winked. Then she walked a few steps down the path before glancing back. Caden had sat down where she'd been moments ago, one hand covering his face as he shook his head slowly. Neve laughed softly, a dry chuckle that echoed just enough to reach him. She swore she could have seen him smile, just for a brief moment, there and gone like mist on the lake. Back in her cell, Neve lay on the narrow bed, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. What the hell was wrong with her, openly flirting with a monk? Since when did she care what a man like him thought of her? Hopefully he hadn't noticed, though that little smirk suggested otherwise. Just silence and sleep.